Ladies and gentlemen, if you have come to this video wanting to learn how to flip land, this is the best video to watch because I'm going to go over the different ways to do it. Now, if you guys don't know who I am, my name is Levi. I am a land investor and the co-owner of MMC Land, where we buy and sell vacant land parcels. So let's get straight into the video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about infill, rural recreational, and a lot more ways to make money in land that don't always correlate with just flipping. So it's important to note that. Again, guys, I want to reiterate, there are so many ways to make money, and I'm probably not even mentioning all of them. So I don't know, I just came up with a couple things. So like, I'll just say like 25% of it is probably just flipping land yourself. So like buying land for cheap and selling it. And this can mean like double closing, wholesaling, actually buying it and flipping it, stuff like that. Now, maybe like 28% of it is actually subdividing land. It's kind of the same thing as this, but it is much different. It's just the spreads are so high that I feel like one of these can make 3 years of your income, which is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? It's actually pretty ridiculous. I feel like because the spreads are so high, even though the volume is lower, you make a lot more than just people flipping land. So I have this worth more, even though you can do like 10 deals here, it just won't equate to this. And let's say, you know, maybe 12% are in the education land business. I do this and this. Now I'm working kind of on growing my education business. A lot of people in the education business, they gather communities and actually they do software as well. So, you know, for example, the Apke brothers have Land Portal. Sumner Healy has Land Insights. I know there's a lot more, but you know, when you have an education business, they take their followers and they give them a software. I'm not interested in software, but you know, I'll just throw software in there as well because it just kind of fits. Now, I would say the biggest chunk, and again, guys, these aren't like actual statistics. These are just kind of off the top of my head. But guys, I would say maybe 35% of the business is just joint venture funding and the note business. These are for the whales, the private equity funds. You know what I mean? These guys make so much money because a lot of this you can't do without this, and as well as this. Now, I would say probably 90% of these deals are probably done with joint venture funders. You know what I mean? And the note business, to be honest, I don't know a ton about the note business, but I just threw it in here because I know that these guys have really big amounts of money as well. So that, you know, they're whales. So guys, let's talk about infill properties. Here's the Google definition. It's basically just a parcel inside of a developed area, mostly cities, but like an urban or suburban area. It's often in between existing buildings because, again, it's a developed area in established neighborhoods, and that, you know, land maybe just hasn't been built on yet. So obviously, guys, you aren't going to be targeting infill lots in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? Because that would be rural infill. Again, these are in developed urban or suburban areas. Infill lots need to be targeted in big or growing cities because that's where you're going to have demand. So you guys want to look to where people are moving to. My biggest advice to go and flip this is to look where new construction is being built in large quantities on Zillow, Redfin, or any other real estate platform. And P.S., you are most likely selling to builders who are going to make new construction homes. Now, I don't specialize in this. I think the person who does this the best is probably Alex Mineo. You guys probably know who he is. He wholesales to builders, so he is very specialized in this area. But I think that this is a very, very effective way to flip land. Again, this isn't my expertise. It's not my niche. But I see the results of it, and I think it's very good. And I kind of explained to you like how to start. This is generally how you would go about targeting infill properties. And then, you know, you're most likely selling to builders, so you would just go and get a builder's list. The best way to do that is kind of just look at things that have sold in that area, and then generally you just skip trace their phone numbers, and then you just cold call them. If I could give, you know, a very simplistic way to explain the infill business model, that's kind of what it looks like. Now, let's talk about rural infill or like subdivision sniping. Now, this is what I do. My background here is this kind of what a platted subdivision looks like. Now, again, this is very similar to infill, except it's more unrestricted land use for anything. And generally, there can be houses on either side, but that's not necessarily expected because it's kind of just vacant land a lot of the time. But guys, if you are doing rural infill, think about it like this. Again, they can be anywhere, not really in the city. So that means generally they're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And you're obviously flipping it to other people, right? So you need to have someone that wants to buy it. You kind of need to have a reason for people to want to be kind of in the middle of nowhere, whether that's to have a weekend getaway or to actually buy and live. So what do I mean exactly? If I'm going to go about doing this and choose this strategy, I would choose counties to pursue with attractive features. So this could be near a big city, 1 to 2 hours away, or maybe 1 to 3 counties removed, depending on how far away the big city is. If there are public water features, so that means rivers, like big rivers, or people can go fish, and maybe there's like public access to it. Or for example, like huge lakes. Again, like if there's a water feature and it's not public, no one can really use it. Like if it's a pond on someone else's property, they can't use it. So you can't really advertise that as like a reason to buy the land, right, to go fishing because it's not yours. But if it's like a huge public lake and anyone can use it and your land's like 5 minutes away, then that is a water feature that is attractive to a lot of people because maybe they want to go fishing on the weekends. You know what I mean? National forests are very big, so I feel like these are the biggest 3, probably in order. Near a big city is probably the number 1, because then you have people that will just go nearby because they want to live outside of the city because city expenses are too high nowadays. But then like you could have a massive water feature, like a huge lake. Like for example, I've bought in land, and it's not really near a big city, but by one of the biggest lakes in Texas. But because it's one of the biggest lakes in Texas, it has a lot of demand. So people are actually willing to go buy it because it's just a really nice lake and a lot of people know about it. And again, national forests are important because some people want to go like hiking and stuff. Hunting areas are cool too, and coasts, etc. There's like a million things that could, make someone attracted to a certain area. So just, kind of use your common sense and think about it a little bit. Coast is a little bit harder because a lot of the times there are bigger cities near the coast, but this still does apply. Maybe you can get 30 minutes away from a big city near the coast, where it's just outside of city limits and it's unrestricted. I guarantee you that will probably sell quickly. Now, sell-through rate is not as important here. So, a lot of times when you're doing infill, you're looking at how hot the area is because these things need to sell quickly. You're not picking them up at as big of discounts. With rural infill, you can get things for even like 20 cents on the dollar, where infill, you get closer to like 50 to 80 a lot of the times. And a lot of the people that do that, generally they're wholesaling. But yeah, again, it's not as important here because you're getting things for super cheap. And again, most of these parcels will be sold off market through Facebook Marketplace. Facebook is the number 1 way to get organic traffic for these lower ticket parcels. And I'm pretty sure that's a fact. I'm pretty sure it like way outperforms land.com. Pretty much the entire like land.com monopoly. They have like all the land websites, right? But Facebook does way better than those. And I can attest to that because I have both. Now, in terms of where to find these subdivisions, again, just choose counties based off attractive features, and that should do you justice. And I kind of want to give a little testimony with this, but before I had the land portal and I could see all the counties like sell-through rates and everything, I was buying in statistically bad counties or slow-moving counties in terms of land sales, but it was fine because I just sold everything off market through Facebook, and it's low ticket, so it's not super expensive, so it doesn't really need to be the hottest county. So yeah. I have a lot of information on this, and most of my videos are on this specific strategy because this is kind of my niche, but I'm kind of just going over everything. Now, in terms of rural recreational, the property is going to primarily be used for outdoor leisure and enjoyment such as hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, ATVing, family retreats, stuff like that, rather than for farming, ranching, or commercial purposes, or even living. Now, this can be any size technically. However, most flippers in the space that target rural recreational parcels are targeting like 2 acres and up for higher spreads. Because really the smaller ones are really considered rural infill because they've been subdivided. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the actual like definition is, but I know a lot of people target like 2 acres and up, for example. Now, again, it's not really to be confused with rural infill, but they are very similar. It's just more people that get rural infill lots are looking for cheaper places to live outside of the cities. Now, again, and then on top of that, most people buying like rural recreational parcels that are like 2 acres and up are looking for recreational use, but this isn't always true. Some people live on 80-acre parcels and they just have, 80 acres around them, or however many acres I just said, I don't remember. They just have a ton of acres around them, and their house is just kind of in the middle of nowhere. Some people like doing that, and again, some people like going on weekend getaways at quarter-acre properties just because there's like a lake nearby, like 5 minutes away, where they can just go fish and they park their boat there and whatnot, right? So rural recreational lots generally have lower margins. Now, you might be buying for like 50 to 70 cents on the dollar, but you have really high spreads. So just one of these can make your whole year compared to doing, 10 rural infill lots. You know what I mean? Now, a lot of people in this space are selling these properties for cash. A lot of people doing rural infill are doing seller financing. I do a lot of seller financing. So it's just kind of up to you on what you want to do. And if you're new, you can really do any of these strategies, but rural recreational, generally, they're more expensive. You know what I mean? So you're going to be using joint venture partners, which are the big whales that loan people money, which is kind of what I talked about earlier. But I really do like this strategy as well. This is like my second favorite. Now, in terms of subdividing, I don't think I put this on the agenda, but this is similar to rural recreational because the parcels are like ginormous, right? And they're expensive. But you're pretty much just taking a rural recreational parcel, it's like a super big parcel, and selling it off into smaller pieces. So it sounds easy at first, and obviously it does sound simple, but it can have many complications from like parcel buildability. Like, so if you have 80 acres, maybe 30 acres of it isn't really buildable, so you can't really just like sell that 30 acres by itself. You know what I mean? Maybe it's like super uneven and it's like a mountain, so someone can't even use it. But yeah, like, you got to do a lot of price per acre research. You got to see how 80 acres is selling by itself, and then see how like 4 20-acre parcels are selling by themselves. See if the split makes sense. Again, there's a lot of county restrictions, so like, it really all starts with the county and choosing the right county to do this in. Because if you do all the other research and the county restrictions are bad, it's going to be hard to subdivide the property, or it could take a really long time and no one's going to want to fund your deal. You also have to get surveys done, and really there's a ton of stuff that goes into subdivides, but that's just a couple off the top of my head. But the bottom line is, you need to be willing to look out for these. And now let me tell you guys why that is. Doing these subdivides, or being open to at least looking to them, open up your possibilities of getting more deals by a lot. So with subdivides, you can make more money selling smaller parcels individually as price per acre goes up when acreage goes down. So like I said before, generally, if you're selling 80 acres, you're going to get less than selling 4 20-acre properties. Of course, you just need to find a couple more buyers for them. So the reason you really have to be on the lookout for these, not just because you can make a lot of money, but because if you are making an offer on a rural recreational parcel, and let's say, you offer 50% of what it's worth and they say no and they want like 65%, if you're able to subdivide it, and again, you need like to make sure that there's road frontage, that there's buildability everywhere, there's not any random stuff that's going to mess up your subdivide, you can generally make higher offers on those properties because you can make more money selling them individually. You know what I mean? So you kind of just have to be on the lookout for this, and the spreads are so high on these. Like, again, one of these can make your year or like even multiple years. You know what I mean? So yeah, again, this is a very important topic, and it's kind of related to rural rec. Now, the education business. When you understand the model and you have made money in your niche, you can start your own land education business. You can charge for coaching and get a community together for other methods such as You can charge for coaching, and you can get a community together for other methods such as deal funding your own community, assigning contracts, and being an affiliate with your partnering software. So a lot of people do this, and it's a good way to make money and help the community at the same time. But you can really only do this when you have real experience and have a system that works, that you can teach to others so they can get results as well, because you do need testimony. Now, obviously, if you're watching this, you're probably a beginner. You probably can't do this, but I thought that this would be good to mention as well. Now, let's get into JV funding. Now, this is where all the masterminds make their money. Again, this is very hard difficulty, because this is really only suitable if you have a large amount of capital and are willing to take the risk of a deal falling short. Because essentially how this works is, if you are a deal funder, you take on all the risk, but you have the highest potential to make money, in my opinion. Now, let me explain why this is. Say I want to borrow $20,000 from a deal funder. The deal funder is pretty much paying for the entire deal at $20,000, but they now have the responsibility of $20,000 of risk. The person who brought them the deal doesn't have the risk, and of course there's different terms, but maybe your funder has 35% of the profit locked in when you go to sell the property. So for example, you front $20,000 because you think it's a good deal, and you have to do a lot of due diligence when you are a joint venture funder. But let's say your property, it was a $20,000 buy and it was under contract, but then you go and you sell it for $40,000, right? And let's say it sells in a month with the person who brought you the deal. Let's say if your terms are 30%, you get like $6,600 of that $20,000, and you got it in a month, and that's because you knew it was a good deal because you did your due diligence and you fronted the money. So now you guys are both in a win-win situation. And you can make a lot of money doing this, because imagine it's a $200,000 property and the property sells for $400,000 in a month. Now, instead of getting $6,600, you just made $66,000 in 1 month, all because you're fronting a lot of money. So it's a hard business for sure. And if you don't do your due diligence, maybe you break even on a deal. Most of the time you probably won't lose money, but you might break even. And then I don't want to get into the specifics, but a lot of these people have, they're like private equity companies. So they kind of just borrow people's money, give them APYs on that money. So they make however much money they want, and then, go and give it back at the end of the year or whatever. Right. But, you essentially take all the risk, but you can make so much money doing that. This is what I want to do, actually. So I'm just working my way up there for now. But again, all funders have their own terms. You can set your own terms and then eventually print money, as most people in the space need access to a large amount of capital. There's a lot of people getting into the business that don't really have the money. So there's a lot of people that have good deals. They need just people to pay for them and take the risks. So as long as you find a good deal and you're making money, you can make so much money deal funding. I think this is the best way to make money in the land space, in my opinion. Now, buying notes. So this is like buying seller financing contracts. Again, this is I would say a hard difficulty, because again, this method requires a large amount of capital, as you are out of your original investment for a very long time in some cases. Selling notes, however, may have a strong use case for some of you, because selling the notes to get access to quick capital for more outreach / more deals, if you're buying them yourself, is always a great option. I don't do this because I like my seller financing contracts, and if you do go sell your note, generally you're probably getting anywhere from 65 to 85% of the actual contract value. It's really up to the person buying the note from you. You can get different quotes and whatnot, right? But yeah, it's good for people that want to sell their notes, but I probably wouldn't do this. I think joint venture funding is probably better, but a lot of people, especially whales, make a lot of money because they can make way more money in a foreclosure scenario if they know that the property will sell again. So again, this is a section I'm least knowledgeable on, but I would much rather do my own deals and get my original investment back or close to that with down payments that customers give me than go and buy notes. You know what I mean? I feel like that just makes more sense. But again, these people don't do outreach, they just buy the notes. So it's kind of how their business model works. Now, in terms of where you should start as a beginner, this is probably the most important slide, apart from actually teaching the two that are right here. But wholesaling infill is very common with beginners, and in my opinion, it's the cheapest to get into because you can do a lot of cold calling here. You can do a lot of cold calling and what I'm going to say here, and that's actually what I recommend, but you're essentially wholesaling, so you don't really need that much money up front. And generally, remember with infill, you're wholesaling to builders. So I think that this is the cheapest to get into, which is why I rank it number 1 as a beginner. However, my personal niche is rural infill subdivision sniping. I believe this is better than flipping infill, but it requires more capital to get started. And this is because generally you're not double closing. It's a lot harder to find buyers, and that's because builders aren't generally building in rural infill subdivisions. So you really got to find people like off market through Facebook generally. But the reason it might not be as good as starting with wholesaling infill is because you actually have to buy the property. So you might need $5,000 to buy a property. I bought properties for as little as $200 before. I bought one for $400. So I buy a lot of cheap properties, but you do actually have to have, I really recommend starting with at least $2,000. You really need to have at least $2,000 to get started here, in my opinion. So guys, this is pretty much the end. I mean, we went over infill lots, rural infill, rural recreational, subdividing, education businesses, joint venture funding, buying notes. And my question to you guys is, where do you think you will start? So definitely leave a comment down below on where you are going to start in the land flipping space. I'm very curious to know. And if you guys have any questions, you can comment that as well, or DM me on Instagram. You can see my socials at the bottom of the screen. But other than that, guys, if you guys like the video, make sure you actually leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're new and are very interested in learning about the land flipping business. I post every Tuesday and Friday generally. So if you subscribe, you can keep up with all of the content. And that's pretty much wraps it up, guys. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day, and peace out.